unveiling posters. First, I would like to introduce the president of our college, Dr. Robert Miller.
Thank you. Oh my goodness, there is probably almost 2,000 students in here, first-year Experience Pathways programs. Let's start by giving yourselves a big round of applause. It's my really distinct honor and pleasure to be here tonight. This is what our college is all about. What I am so particularly proud of is every one of you for sticking with this program, doing what you have done today, all the research and the projects that you've worked on, the amazing displays that we had out in the quad today. I was blown away by the level of engagement that each of you had when you were basically discussing your posters and discussing your research. And I saw a lot of future corporate executives out there, I'll tell you that. You guys looked really, really, really great. So before I go too much further here, I want to just introduce a couple of folks, and we need to thank some people. First of all, I want to thank Professor Rose Sheila for putting this on for everybody. And there are two partners in crime there, Miriam Atunja. Is Miriam here? And then certainly Tiffany Engel. Thank you, Professor Engel. Great work. Do we have anybody here from the library faculty, staff members? All right. The library, in any academic institution plays an incredible role, but I think for a project like this, you guys really earned your pay this past semester, so we really, really appreciate that. I also want to thank Dr. Brock Klein. Is Dr. Klein here? Dr. Brock Klein runs he's our Associate Dean for Pathways and Professional Learning, but he runs a teaching and learning center, and he's been doing this for many years. And this started with about 100 students and grew to what we have today. And Professor Rose said, no more scaling up, and I said, are you kidding? We're going to build another auditorium. Don't worry about that. All right, so the next people I want to thank, can the faculty who have been teaching all these wonderful College One classes and everything else please stand up and be recognized? A college is nothing without students, but it's really nothing without teachers and faculty. And so we have some of the best in the country here at PCC, so I'm very, very grateful for that. How many success coaches do we have here in the room? Are there any success coaches here? Can you guys stand to be recognized? All right. Now, the great thing about success coaches is that not only are they academically good, but they're also good at kicking you guys in the butt when you need it. And that's really important as well. So we really appreciate what they do. How about mentors and tutors? Do we have mentors and tutors here in the room? Anybody here tonight can do that? All right. Okay, so I'm gonna make one last introduction, and then I'm going to say a couple of brief things, and I'm going to be quiet. So I do want to introduce Dr. Robert Bell. So Dr. Bell, stand up and be recognized. Dr. Bell is our Assistant Superintendent and Senior Vice President for Academic and Student Affairs, and he is at the helm of all of these things that happen, and we appreciate Dr. Bell. And is Dr. Olivo in the room? Yes, and Dr. Cynthia Olivo, who is our Associate Vice President for Student Affairs, and she's also an amazing person. Anyway, the bottom line is we have some really incredible folks here at PCC, and we're all about providing services for students like you. And you're all members of our first-year program, and we want you to be members of our second-year program as well. Dr. Klein may die over that, but we want that to happen next. So with that said, I'm just going to be quiet at this point, and I think we're going to give out the awards. Is that correct? And I want to congratulate everybody. I am really looking forward to Brando Skyhorse's presentation. The Madonnas of Echo Park, As I looked at the posters and things this afternoon, I was really, really intrigued by them, and I know all those topics came from Mr. Skyhorse's book, so we're looking forward to that. So without further ado, I'll turn it back over to Professor Rose, and we'll go from there. Thank you all very, very much, and congratulations.
Okay, so this is the exciting time when we get to hand out the awards for the winning posters from today. We had about 12 judges going around, and they said they had pretty much an impossible job to pick the winners. So I know a lot of you had amazing posters that also could have been winners. A lot of it was just trying to pick 8 out of 400 was really, really difficult. So our first winning poster we have from Professor Rhea Preciado's class. The Changing Composition of Los Angeles County from 1970 to 2000, and the winners are
Daniela Valdez, Patrick Lee, Joey Tsai, Matthew Thatcher, and Victor Lee.
Please come up.
Come on up.
Victor Lee. Hi, how are you doing? well. This is, okay.
Okay, to keep the show rolling, I'm going to announce the next winning
Victor
poster from Professor Robert Randall's class. The Effects of Immigration on Families. And the winners are
Yenhui Sung, James Lin, Yinging Sao, and Wenbin Jian.
Thank you for the next one.
Oh, that's it?
Yeah, you announce that.
Do they get Starbucks these things? Oh, there's more.
Okay.
Okay, our next winners are from Professor Graciela Martinez's class. LA Dodgers Culture, Viviana Granados, Stephanie Olorgi, Juan Negrete, and Andre Martinez. Mr. Lee's right over there.
The next winning poster was from Professor Fei Lau, Violence Prevention in Los Angeles. The participants were Kaylee Dimacali, Joshua Doe, and Vanessa Ramirez.
Victor Lee is sitting right there. He didn't get his.
Okay. Okay, and now for our honorable mention. The first poster is from Professor Christina Sheldon from the Libraries class. How was Olvera Street founded? And the winners are Brianne Pastrana, Eric Bryce, Jordan Brown, and Iris Lynn. And our next poster is from Professor Gina Lopez's class. How the lack of proper documentation impacts the stability of Mexican immigrants in the labor force. And the winners are Paula Morales, Kamari Wells, Jose Najera, and Dijon Williams. Please come up. I guess till we run out. Did you read this? Yeah. And they're counting us. Yeah. Okay, we have 2 more posters from Professor Junior Hernandez, Los Angeles Crime. And the winners are Julian Loza, Samuel Nyi, Leo Yang, Sofia Granados, and Alexandra Alonso. Please come on up. And the final winning poster is from Professor Bevel Constantine, How Do Gangs Affect Society? The winning team is Mark DeGrassa, Andrew Wan, Jeffrey Castro, and Jocelyn Mesa. Please come up.
We're not going to do one. Yeah.
Nice job, guys. Yeah, thank you.
And at this time, I would like to invite Christina Sheldon, College One instructor and librarian extraordinaire, to the stage to introduce the one and only Brando Skyhorse. Please come up, Christina.
Hi, everyone. My name is Christina Sheldon. I'm a longtime librarian at Pasadena City College and other area schools. I'm a proud instructor of the College One first year seminar. Holla back, section 4883. And I'm a collaborator and colleague of the fantastic instruction and coaching team for PCC's first year Pathways program. Today, I'm honored to introduce Brando Skyhorse for his keynote presentation at the 2014 First Year Pathways Conference. Brando is a graduate of Stanford University and the Master of Fine Arts Writers Workshop program at UC Irvine. He was raised and attended high school about 10 miles southwest of here in Echo Park, but currently lives in Washington, D.C., where he is serving for this year as the 2014 Jenny McKeon Moore Writer in Residence, established to encourage the teaching and study of creative writing at George Washington University. The novel that so many of you have read, The Madonnas of Echo Park, was Brando's first book, published in 2011, when it gained high acclaim and 2 distinguished awards: the Penn Hemingway Foundation Award for a novel by an American author who hadn't been previously published, and the Sue Kaufman Award for First Fiction from the American Academy of Arts and Letters. In June of this year, Brando's second book, Take This Man, was released to additional success. The memoir tells the story of his heritage as an American Indian, a heritage based entirely on stories invented by his charismatic mother. At age 13, Brando learned that he was not in fact the son of an American Indian activist, but instead the son of a Mexican man who had left the family when Brando was only 3 years old. The true stories that Brando shares in that memoir, and he may share a bit of today, from his young adulthood are fascinating and inspiring as they demonstrate that the truth is often and genuinely stranger than fiction. Brando and I share some fundamental experiences and perspectives. We are both alumni of Stanford University who appreciate the doors it opened for us on our respective paths of lifelong learning. We are both teachers who are continually inspired by our own students. We both have roots in Los Angeles that we've found impossible to shake as we traveled away from and back home to this land of jacarandas and palm trees. But most importantly, we are friends who believe in the power of books and stories to change lives, often for the better, who know that characters such as Hector, Felicia, Beatriz, Efren, Manny, Freddie, Angie, and Aurora walk or sit right here in Sexton Auditorium among us, struggling with the daily challenges and rewards of love, hurt, joy, and abandonment. It's exciting stuff, isn't it? I'm so grateful that Brando has shared his gifts of observation and empathy through his written words, and today will elaborate on those gifts in person for the Pasadena City College community. Please join me in a warm round of applause for Brando Skyhorse.
You are beautiful, PCC. How you doing tonight? I have been up since 2 a.m. your time. This is exactly what I need. Thank you all so much for being so generous with your time and coming out here on a Thursday evening. Good evening, Lancers. Good evening, Pasadena. I'm thrilled to be here. I'm honored to travel all the way from Washington, D.C., where I teach, New York City, where I lived for 17 years, and Echo Park, California, where I was born and raised. Before I talk to you today, let me ask politely that you please turn off all cell phones and tablets for the next 30 minutes or so. I understand you might have trouble adhering to this recommendation, but let me tell you two things right now. Number one, time goes by so much faster when you aren't bent over a machine reminding you that you're bored. And B, people my age get a little insecure when they look out at you and just see the tops of scalps and illuminated foreheads. See, to people my age, holding up a phone or an iPad, no matter how discreetly you're doing it, reminds us of another gesture that people do with their hands. That could be construed as rude. In fact, that gesture usually involves one hand and one finger. I won't perform that particular gesture here at this August occasion, but the next time you're using your phone or your tablet in class, ask yourself, am I confident enough with my grade that I can flip off my professor? My name is Brando Skyhorse, and I am the author of The Madonnas of Echo Park, the novel that you were all asked to read this year as homework. I'm here to answer, I hope, why I think your college picked this book and why Pasadena City College invited us to spend the evening tonight together. It's to help each of you answer two questions. How will I do in college? And what kind of person will I be after I graduate? If you actually did your homework and read Madonnas, and judging from the posters I saw this afternoon, you did wonderfully, you're off to a better start as college students than I was. The summer before I started college, I didn't read any books at all. What I did was work, fight with my parents, and hang out with my girlfriend. I thought, now, not that way. I thought, I'm in college. I don't need to prepare for things anymore. I've been accepted to Stanford University, a lower middle class kid that got a ton of financial aid, going to one of the most expensive and prestigious schools in the nation. I don't bring that up to brag, but to illustrate the point that instead of spending time not reading books, I should have been preparing. I should have been terrified. But how can you prepare for something when you have no idea what that something is? All I knew about Stanford was what came in my glossy application catalog. This was pre-internet, so there was nothing I could research. Nobody in my family had gone to college. My mother had gone to beauty school, but was asked not to come back because she got into too many fights with her customers. I hadn't talked to anyone what college was supposed to be like. I literally thought someone handed me a schedule with all of my classes pre-assigned on it, and then I just went to whatever classes I was told to take, just like in high school. But college wasn't like high school at all. In high school, I was reminded every day how smart and exceptional and unique I was. All that praise and validation vanished. I went from living in a house with my mother and grandmother where the television never stopped playing to living in a room with a 23-year-old roommate from Singapore who had already served 2 years in his country's military and sometimes ate in the morning for breakfast uncooked Spam out of a can in our dorm room. My RA said we'd look like we'd be a good match on paper. We were not. There was no cable television in our dorms, no iPads, no Facebook. Email was actually an optional service from the college until my senior year. I participated in a residential-based course called Structured Liberal Education, 9 units of credit. All of the students in this course were housed in the same dorm. We met for class in our central dorm meeting areas. That means we studied together, ate all our meals together, hung out together, and could never get a free moment away from each other. Believe it or not, I actually signed up for this course. Like I said, I knew nothing about college. During mealtimes, we talk about our first paper. And by talked, I mean bragged. We sat around like puffed up peacocks because, hey, we were Stanford freshmen. On our acceptance letters, the admissions dean had written each of us a tiny personalized message. My letter had, "Bravo, Brando." At the breakfast table, several students wondered what was written on the letters of people who didn't get in. You know, quote, the losers. Sorry, Charlie. No way, Jose. Since I had no social connections in common with my fellow students, remember, I was poor and the first in my family to go to college. I was the biggest bragger of them all. For our assigned first paper, we had to write 3 pages on Greek history. I wrote 8 pages, over twice the pages that had been asked of us, then proudly, smugly told everyone I knew about my massive page count. Everyone, of course, pretended to be impressed. I'd come to Stanford to be an entertainment lawyer. I can't remember why I chose this career path. Now that I think about it, it had something to do with my belief, which I blame solely on 1980s television, that entertainment lawyers were rich and drove expensive cars. Remember, this was pre-Jay-Z. English and writing were my strongest subjects, and Hollywood, not my parents, who never discussed college with me, had led me to believe good writers should go to law school. And when I say good writers here, I'm being modest. When I was 18, I thought I was an exceptional writer. I knew my application essays were the main reason I'd been accepted to Stanford. Writing wasn't the only thing I was best at. Writing was the thing. The instructor that had signed my paper was also my resident fellow, and I had to go to the end of a very long corridor in his apartment where he lived to get my paper back. It was on his dining room table. I flipped through its pages and saw it was free of any marks. My God, Stanford was going to be easier than I thought. My instructor sat down next to me, slid the paper between us, and said, "Did you have problems writing in high school?" What I'd written was in such terrible shape, he didn't even bother marking it up. This instructor wasn't offering to help me. I don't think he even mentioned that Stanford had a writing center on campus where people could get help on their papers free of charge. He wasn't speaking to me as someone that clearly needed a life preserver. He wasn't speaking to me as an aspiring writer with a promising future and a voice that needed to be nurtured. He was speaking to me as someone who he'd clearly hoped had come to Stanford for reasons other than writing, and was going to do as little as possible to help me and do as much as possible to discourage me. The fact I am telling you this story 23 years after it happened should tell you how exceptional a job he did that night. I went back to my room, set my paper on my desk, and pulled out a bag to start packing my things to go home. I'd been at college only 4 weeks, but Stanford was obviously a mistake. I wasn't going to make it. Who was I pretending to be? One of my better friends in high school told me I'd gotten into Stanford because of affirmative action. This despite the fact I had higher test scores and grades than he did. Clearly, he'd been right. Nobody wanted me at college anyway. My girlfriend hated that we had to have a long-distance relationship. My mother hated that I'd moved out of the house and left her alone with my grandmother. All I had to do was pack up my things. I hadn't brought much, some clothes, a few blankets and towels, a CD boombox, it was the early 1990s after all, and tell my mom I was coming home. The only problem was that my home wasn't a safe place for me either. My mother and grandmother, though loving and compassionate, could also be volatile, violent people capable of inflicting severe pain. I had to make a choice. I chose to go to bed. The next morning, I unpacked my bag and went to my next class. I can't tell you why I chose to stay in college. It didn't get any easier. I was in a state of perpetual panic every quarter. I was on academic probation at Stanford twice because I dropped classes at an alarming rate and didn't have the units necessary to maintain either my financial aid or my standing as a student. I was suicidal and told what few friends I had that I wouldn't leave to see my 30th birthday, let alone my 20th. When I had my exit interview with my Stanford undergrad advisor, he shook his head and told me, "Well, Brando, you never did find your place here at Stanford." What nobody really knew, because I never told anybody, was that I was exhausting myself from trying to separate from my dysfunctional family. From the time I moved to college in September to the time I came back home for winter break, my mother met, moved in, and was engaged to a man that answered her singles ad from a homeless shelter. This man would become my 5th stepfather. My mother called me 15 to 20 times a week, leaving haranguing messages on my machine pleading for attention. She'd call and tell me she was having a nervous breakdown. She'd call and tell me once every 2 or 3 months she was going to kill herself. She'd call and tell me without any regard to my study schedule, whether I was writing papers or studying for midterms or finals, that I was a terrible son, that she hated me, and that I had no place in her house when I was done with school. She told me I had abandoned her because I was so selfish to go off to college and put a greater value on my own life, my own education, instead of hers. So I had to decide which life was more important, my mother's or my own. I also had to make a much larger decision. I had to decide to continue to do something I had been told I was not good at. I had to decide to continue to do something I'd been told I hadn't rightly earned. I had to decide to continue to do something that, because a fair amount of my financial aid came from loans, would put me in debt for years to come. I was literally investing my own future earnings. I was investing in the fact that my own future me would have the money to pay those loans back. I had to decide to continue to do something that really didn't have the support of anyone I knew. I want to go back to that 18-year-old me, a version of which could be sitting here in this audience right now, and tell him it's going to be okay. It's okay to cut off ties with people that aren't healthy for you. It's okay to acknowledge you cannot handle everything life has thrown at you for the sole reason that you are 18 or 19, and life is unfair, and it very often throws more things at some people than it does at others. Nobody in this audience will escape the experience of feeling overwhelmed here sometime over the next 2 years. Nor will you escape the feeling of being overwhelmed when you transfer, and you all will transfer, to your next college. I want to tell that 18-year-old me that it's okay to ask for help. All of Stanford's infinite resources were useless to me because I never took advantage of them. I never asked anyone for help, so nobody knew I was in trouble. I want to tell that 18-year-old Brando it's okay to follow a path that feels right solely to you and you alone, because that's what adults do. Even though I made the decision to stick it out at Stanford the wrong way, it was the right thing to do. Staying in college was the first real decision I'd made about how my adult life was going to look like. It was my first real decision as an adult. When I had calmed down, I started revising that 8-page paper. I turned it in and got a mediocre grade. I wrote more papers for that instructor, and once I learned what he was specifically looking for, got an okay grade that quarter. I kept writing and revising my work over winter quarter with a new instructor, and by the end of that term had gotten my first A on a paper. It had taken me 20 weeks, 5 months, or over half my freshman year to figure out how to write one decent paper. This, remember, being the only thing that I thought I was good at. I needed a job to support myself, so I applied for and became a writing tutor at Stanford's Writing Center. In my dorm junior year, which had 100 students, I calculated I'd helped close to 70 students with their writing and papers, most of whom would never dreamed of going to the Writing Center for help, but were less intimidated asking me because I lived in the same hall as them. I became an English creating writing major, got my MFA in creative writing right out of college, worked in publishing as an editor, helping hundreds of writers improving their own work, then started publishing books that I wrote myself. I just published my second book this June. My first book, this book you were asked to read, won both the First Fiction Award from the American Academy of Arts and Letters and the Penn Hemingway, the most prestigious award a work of debut fiction can win in this country. Madonnas was selected over 150 books nominated that year. I accomplished all of this despite someone telling me when I was exactly the same age and situation you are all in right now, at the exact moment in time you're all here experiencing now. Did you have problems writing in high school? I accomplished this despite someone telling me you're not good at what you like to do and I'm not going to help you get better. I accomplished this by listening to my own voice and not the voices of others. This is the difference between a teenager in high school, what you all were, and an adult in college, which is what you are all now. An adult listens to their own voice. It is a voice that isn't swayed by ignorance, seduced by fear, or succumbs to pettiness, bitterness, or prejudice. It is a simple, clear voice that says, "This is the best of who I can be." Listen to it and you will thrive here at PCC and at whatever school you transfer to and as a human being in your life. Ignore it and you will slowly calcify and harden into every mean and petty adult you've ever met that has told you act a certain way that isn't who you are, dress a certain way that isn't who you are, worship a certain way, date a certain way, or be a certain way. It requires courage to be a true adult, someone unswayed by bigotry or fear. This is why you've met so few of them. Bravery in the face of prejudice or fear is rare. Most of us are cowards when it counts. Worse, our opportunities to stand up to intolerance happens in small moments you aren't even aware of until long after they've passed. It's easy to be seduced by intolerance. Which brings me to the second question I hope this book helps you answer. What kind of person will I be here on this campus with my fellow students and long after I graduate? Madonnas is fundamentally about those all too quick moments we give in to intolerance. Each chapter focuses on the very real human situations each of us face when we are forced to make a decision that we and we alone believe in. There are, of course, many different issues that the characters in Madonnas have to grapple with, issues like immigration and gentrification and identity, but in the end, each character, much like you, faces a simple test. Will they be strong enough to be empathetic to someone they feel doesn't deserve our understanding? How will each of us react in a moment when we need to be our very best versions of ourselves? Empathy is the ability to understand and share the feelings of others. Whenever a character expresses empathy for someone in Madonnas, like when Aurora expresses empathy for her mother, Felicia, at the book's end, they flourish. When they don't, like the bus driver, Ephraim, they doom themselves to bitterness, anger, and fear. They doom themselves as people. When I say empathy, I mean this. You understand how someone that is not you feels and understand why someone that is not you does what they do or acts the way that they act. Without empathy, you make someone else an other. When someone becomes an other, they cease to be a person and become a category, an inferior race, a substandard gender, a nobody with limited intelligence. Without empathy, you turn your fellow human beings into animals. You dehumanize them. Dehumanized people end up doing bad things. But when you dehumanize somebody because of their race, because of their gender, because of who they fall in love with, or because of where they're from, how they speak or look or sound, you are failing as a human being. You are dehumanizing yourself. When we dehumanize anyone we consider an other, anyone that isn't like our friends, our family, the people we grew up in our neighborhood, we take the easy way out and act like it isn't a big deal. When we hear someone say or say it ourselves something racist, we pretend we didn't hear what was said, or we're saying, oh, take it easy, it was a joke. We shift the burden of being a better person onto someone else because we don't have the courage or the strength or moral character to do it ourselves. There's a famous quote that goes, "Evil flourishes when good men do nothing." How many times in Madonnas did someone staying silent when they should have spoken up, or doing nothing when they should have done something, anything, lead to a character feeling pain, feeling lost, disillusioned, or feeling like they didn't understand who they truly were? When each of my characters chose to dehumanize someone else, they ended up dehumanizing themselves. Imagine each of my book's characters like spokes on a wheel. Each spoke or character is a different facet of our personality types, but they all connect to the same person, you. Everyone here has had thoughts or said things or written things online that were mean, hurtful, cruel, cowardly, pathetic, racist, insincere, or just plain wrong. This is what we as humans do. We learn how to convert our fears and anxieties into hate and project that hate onto others. We are exceptional at this. While my novel is fictional, each of my characters is based or inspired by real-life experiences I had myself or observed in others, meaning that in order to understand who I am as a person, I wanted to understand things either myself or other people I knew had done. That's why I chose to write about them. In the chapter called Author's Note, The character, Brando Skyhorse, talks about denying a dance to Aurora Esperanza because she was a Mexican and his mother had told him that being a Mexican was beneath him. Many people have read this author's note assuming that this was a true incident. It's not, despite the fact that the copyright note of my book clearly states this is a work of fiction. If you're one of the readers that made that mistake, it's not your fault. People make this mistake in part because most people don't look at small print too closely. They also make this mistake because people in general believe what they are told. This is why so many fake stories spread so fast on Facebook and why nobody believes true stories anymore when they hear them. The words work of fiction on my copyright page are tiny and easily overlooked. Things that are true are often hidden in plain sight and you have to work really hard to see them. Lies, on the other hand, can be easily seen and are easily believed. The words author's note are much larger and hit you right in the face as soon as you open the book. I called this fictional story about Aurora author's note on purpose. I tricked you into thinking something was true when it wasn't, just based on 2 words. I did this because I wanted you to share the same experience you would have had if you had met me before I was honest about being a Mexican. I grew up in a Mexican household. Both my grandmother and mother and biological father were Mexican, though I really didn't know any of this at the time. I had been told that I was an American Indian because my mother thought it would be more exciting or exotic to be an American Indian, and made up American Indian backgrounds for both of us. How did she accomplish this? Simple, 2 words: Brando Skyhorse. Why do people lie when lies cause pain? This author's note was my way of attempting to empathize with myself for all the times I lied to people about who I really was, empathizing for assuming an Indian identity, for stealing an identity from a people that have had so many things stolen from them, and attempting to empathize with my mother for her inability to be honest about who she and I really were. Her inability to do anything but lie consumed her, but not empathizing with her for years nearly destroyed me. My Mexican father left me when I was 3. I knew that my mother was a difficult person to live with and had assumed that she had kicked him out of the house. I didn't know the whole circumstances about my father's disappearance, so I created Hector's story to understand my biological father's actions. How could someone leave their child behind without writing a single letter or paying a penny in child support? How could you abandon a child without ever thinking or looking back? I write fiction to understand the world I live in and why people do the things that they do, why I do the things I do. Hector was directly inspired by my biological father, even though I had no idea where he was or what he was doing or how he'd spent the 30-plus years he'd been gone. My mother told me all sorts of fantastical stories about my father. He'd gotten hit on the head with a brick she threw at him and then gave him amnesia, or he joined the Mexican mafia. I believed these outlandish lies for years until I tried to imagine what the likeliest scenario for him was. In the novel, Hector has 2 girls and disappears into an anonymous life as a day laborer that works outdoors in literally the same neighborhood as his children. When I found my biological father, Candido, just 4 years ago, after Madonnas had already been written and published, I discovered he had started a new family with 3 new daughters, my 3 new amazing sisters, who I know are somewhere out here in the audience tonight because they couldn't get in. Are you out here? There they are right there. They were all living in a neighborhood just 30 minutes away from my house and had been doing so for years. He was working as an outdoor groundskeeper, and my biological father had married a woman named Aurora, which is the main character name of the last chapter of the book. I knew none of this when I was writing the book, but clearly my powers of imagination, my powers of empathy were able to create a scenario for someone like my biological father that were very close to real life. Ephraim, the bus driver, is based in part on the man I call my father, Frank. I had 5 different stepfathers growing up, but Frank was the only one that would come back year after year after year. It sounds like a touching story because although he never married my mother, he wanted to be some kind of father to me. Our relationship was very sweet kind and loving, but it was also marked by characteristic bouts of anger and selfishness on both our parts because we are both human. Frank had a particular anxiety about being on time whenever he went somewhere. We both lived in Los Angeles, and traffic here, as you know, is extremely unpredictable. That meant that whenever Frank took me to the beach growing up, or a museum, or a movie, sometimes we were late because the traffic was heavier than he thought it would be. Sometimes it was because when he came to pick me up, he and my mother would get in a fight. There were many times when he'd show up to take me somewhere, get in a fight with my mother, then speed off and disappear without even saying goodbye. Over time, I grew to resent Frank and wrote him and his attempts to parent and love me off as not worth my time or trouble. Then, as I got older and became my own man, who was in his own difficult romantic relationships, I understood things differently. I realized a man like Frank, a man like the bus driver Ephraim, needs to order their lives to make them forget about the parts of their daily routine they have no control over. Otherwise, life is too overwhelming. Needless to say, the bus driver is Frank's favorite character in the book. He doesn't see Ephraim as a bad guy. He sees Ephraim as himself, a man that follows the rules in a society that does not place a value on such men, which means I did my job in portraying Ephraim with empathy. Then, finally, there is Aurora. Aurora is the character I consider the most like me. In the last chapter, she's in the same place I was in when I was writing Madonnas. I was what people called overeducated and underemployed. I'd fallen into a career editing books because after a few feeble attempts, I couldn't become a published writer. I discovered being a published writer was my dream job in college through creative writing courses I took, but instead of continuing to send stories out, face the inevitable rejections, and taking those opportunities to make my work better, I stopped submitting my work. I had a spoiled and entitled attitude over what I thought I deserved, meaning I had an overpriced college degree and had done essentially nothing with it. Aurora learns in the book that the only way she can move forward in her life is to go backwards. That is, to go back home and understand who she really is. I'd written stories that had essentially had nothing to do with how I felt about the neighborhood I grew up in. I'd shared nothing unique or personal about me in anything I'd written before Madonnas, which is why all of those pieces were failures. Aurora's story and the author's note were the first two pieces I wrote for Madonnas. I had been writing since I was 16 years old, and these were the first two real honest pieces of fiction I'd written because they were how I felt about the world. I'd learned in writing those pieces that my job is to go out into the world, observe it, then record and report my findings. If you want to have a successful career here as a college student or as a good life as a human being, this must become your job too. This doesn't mean each of you must become writers. It means that it is your job to explore, experience, and express yourself. Not through silence, but through action and words. Find out what you love to do here, then do it. If you haven't found what that thing or those things are by the time you transfer or graduate from college 4 years from now, and most of us don't, you must keep searching. You've got so many years ahead of you. If that's something you love, doesn't promise a steady paycheck, do it anyway. That is an adult decision, and every adult that is a painter or a musician or a writer or creative type has made the same adult decision and has been living their lives just fine. Doing this will not be an easy decision because people will remind you of how hard that path is. Ironically, the people that will remind you of this usually have never had the courage to make the same decision themselves. Fortunately, it is not their decision to make. It's yours. Take classes here in subjects you have been told you are not good at, or classes in subjects that will not make you any money, or enroll in a subject that doesn't have the support of anyone you know. Trust me when I say you will never get that chance again in your life. Encourage yourself to take risk and unlearn what you think you already know. College is not to reinforce facts you've already accumulated to get in here. College is to learn knowledge that you'll use to live the rest of your lives when you get out of here. You will be faced over the next 2 years here with countless situations where you will need to seek empathy in others and many times not receive it. In return, you will have to show compassion and empathy to people you may not believe deserve it. This is the best path that I know of to becoming a person that changes the world. The more often you do this, the more often you give empathy to others and don't expect anything in return, the easier it will be to do after you leave here. The adult you'll live your life as more often than not gets formed by the decisions you'll make in this school, starting here, starting now. In my 4 college years, I decided not to drop out, made a conscious decision to break away from my family, legally changed my Mexican name to the American Indian one I have today, and decided to become a writer. There's not a day goes by that I don't feel the consequences of the decisions I made when I was in college, and I am so grateful for that. When people say, I wish I could go back and do college again, they aren't saying they wish they could act stupid and get drunk every day and have no responsibilities. Well, maybe that's partly why they're saying that, but they're saying it because they all want the chance to discover who they are all over again and to develop the courage to be that person they dreamt they'd be when they were 18, not the person they turned out to be instead. 10 years from now, when you look back at this moment where you are right here tonight, will you tell yourself, I am the person I want to be? If you practice empathy and fearlessness every day, you won't have to. Here's some words I hope you take with you long after you've forgotten what I've said here tonight. The great poet Wallace Stevens wrote, "After the final no, there comes a yes, and on that yes, the future world depends. Always take and give yes for an answer." Thank you so much, and good learning to you all.
Mr. Skyhorse has agreed to stay on and entertain your questions. So if you have developed a question you would like to ask Brando, please form a line at one of the 2 microphones we have up front.
Let me see if I can try to hear you. Yeah.
Oh, it's okay. Your novel and your author's note set up this kind of theme of disenfranchisement and loss of self, throughout the book. I was wondering now, was this disenfranchisement supposed to be what Aurora feels in the author's note, or was it a disenfranchisement that Brando Skyhorse, the character, and to some extent yourself felt when you were first going to Mexico?
I think the theme of disenfranchisement is evident in Aurora and the character Brando Skyhorse and in myself. I was certainly writing from a place where I felt that I didn't have a lot of options and I didn't feel like I had an opportunity for my voice to be heard. So, sorry, can't see you over the bottle. I think that was certainly a conscious decision on my part. But I think a book about people being disenfranchised would be ultimately very boring. So I had to put something had to happen in it too. Yeah. So if you wrote about something that was just a bunch of people I'm really not connecting with anybody, I don't think anyone would read it. I think the idea was to put people who felt disenfranchised into situations where they were forced to act, and then seeing how those characters would respond. And for me personally, the way in which I had to act was to basically write this book. I had an idea that I'd wanted to pursue. I'd been wanting to be a published author for a really long time, and this was basically my challenge to myself. And it took me a while, but I got there.
Thank you.
Sure, thank you.
Hi, how are you doing?
I'm doing good tonight, sir. I like your tie.
Oh, thanks. All right, so we know that there's a shooting in the story, right? And we never hear of it again except for, I believe, one of the characters. So why the shooting?
I needed something to happen. And it was, pretty dramatic way to get something going. So yeah, that it was not something more complicated than that. But yeah, I needed something to happen. Do you mean why I chose specifically a shooting, or
why did you choose a shooting?
Yeah, I think I knew it would be something dramatic, and I think again a shooting creates a narrative.
Right.
Violence against one another, like somebody shooting something for whatever, there has to be a story behind it. I was always fascinated growing up in that you would hear stories of violence in Echo Park, which was certainly a little more violent, back in the 80s than it is now. And you would hear this sort of burst of information about, oh, somebody had gotten shot, whatever, and then you would never hear anything about it again. And so it's like, well, what happens, after sort of the initial burst of interest?
Right.
How do you follow that through? So that's what I was really interested in doing.
It's a mystery.
Kind of, yeah, a little bit. I mean, not, yeah, I think so. The book's not really a mystery, but I wanted something to happen, and it was an interesting narrative for me to explore. There were a number of characters, as I sort of mentioned in my talk, about, characters that sort of directly inspired characters in the book. There's a character called the Coke Queen. And she was basically inspired by a homeless woman that was walking around my neighborhood who would wear this like overgrown coat and a turban, and she hadn't showered, and it's like, what's her story? And there were all sorts of rumors in the neighborhood, but nobody could really give you a specific idea of what the deal was. Right. So that's why I was really fascinated. It's like, okay, well, I'm going to imagine what her story is. And again, the story became something really cool and interesting and just a lot of fun to write. So.
Well, it's certainly a great choice.
Oh, thank you, sir. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Hi, Brendan. How are you?
Hi, how are you?
I just wanted to say that you really inspired me and opened up my eyes of why am I here, and I want to thank you for that.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Testing. Is this on?
I can hear you.
Just to get things out of my head. You see, when I first heard about you, you weren't kind of like what I was expecting to be, in a way.
I'm not sure how to take that. I'll take that as a compliment, though. I'm happy to have surprised you with.
Yeah. Anyway, you see, okay, how do I start? Oh, yes. You see, since midterms is already done, and unfortunately I have like 60% in my Math 131 class, and I have a feeling that if I don't do good by the end of the semester, I'm going to be put on academic probation for college algebra. I was in that time what you said about how you went on academic probation like 2 times, and how you were in high schools, and you keep hearing all these comments, it kind of reminded me of myself one time. Back even, it's way before, even in middle school. Like, in a way you could say I didn't really learn a single damn thing, I was kind of hoping if you could give me a little advice, something a little bit more than just what you said tonight.
Yeah, I appreciate you coming up here and asking that. It takes a lot of bravery to acknowledge something like that, especially in an auditorium like this. And I think the best thing I can say is that these situations which seem really seismic right now will fade and recede with time, because you will get better. You will. It's as simple as that. You're here for a reason.
Yeah.
I know you can't see that, and right now you may not believe it, but you will. It's as simple as that. You may have to work harder. You may have to hire a tutor. You may have to do things and make sacrifices that you might be uncomfortable with, but you'll get better.
I suppose. Thank you.
Sure.
I was just asking if I could get your autograph on my book.
I think I'm doing a signing after this, so, yeah, I'll stick around.
Hi, my name's Daniela. So my question was, throughout the novel, you talk about the Jacaranda tree a lot, and I was always curious about it. Every time you brought it up, I wanted to know the significance of it, and why it played such a big role in the book. So my question is, why did you bring it in, and what kind of brought you to talk about it?
There was a jacaranda tree outside the house I grew up in. That's it. And I really like jacaranda trees. And, just sitting, looking outside, my house outside my bedroom window, thinking, Lord, am I ever going to get out of here? I would look at the jacaranda tree. And it was always something that filled me with hope.
So it's like a reminder of home?
It's a reminder of me being able to find a place away from home. Yeah, sure.
Hi. In the chapter of The Hustler, how he was in prison for a while and he just came back and he was shocked to see that the world changed. Was that kind of a realization that once you got to college, it was just all different, things were getting actually faster, or was it like after you graduated from college?
I don't think that specific chapter, had much to do with college per se. I appreciate that reading, and I can certainly see how one would interpret it that way. That was based more off of an experience off of one of my 5 stepfathers who came back to the neighborhood and discovered that it wasn't, his old stomping grounds. And, trying to imagine the space that one would occupy, knowing that, feeling that, you knew the neighborhood in a certain way when you were young and vital and, were basically just a hardcore criminal. And then coming back and realize that you're completely out of step with the rest of the world. That's more the perspective that I was approaching that from.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Hi.
You said that when you were writing the book that you made the characters so people would empathize with them, like have empathy.
Yeah.
I myself am trying to write a book, and I have gone through a lot of experiences. So, do you have I know that's how I want to write my book, where there's characters that explain certain emotions for people, like some emotions you don't understand. What
Sure.
do you suggest I would do?
Read a lot. Read a lot more books and look at how other writers express themselves, and then write a lot, and then revise, and then throw stuff away, and then keep repeating the process until you have something that you're happy with. As I mentioned in my speech, I started writing when I was 16. I'm 41 now. And this book came out 5 years ago when I was 36. So basically, it took me about 19 to 20 years to get to that point. 19 to 20 years of never having been published before anywhere. The book that you're reading tonight, that was the first thing that I ever published, ever. So it took me a really, really long time to get it down. And that's because I was focusing less on what the characters wanted to do and focusing more on what I wanted to say. I know it sounds weird to say, but ultimately the characters, if you're observing the world, if you're reporting what you see every day, the characters will tell you what they want to be. They'll stop listening to you. And that's when you know you have something. And that process could take, it could take a month, it could take 20 years like it took me. But I'm guessing you're a lot smarter than I am, so it probably won't take you 20 years.
Thank you.
Sure.
Hi, Brando Skyhorse. It's a pleasure to meet you and hear your speech. It was very
Thank you.
inspirational. And my question for today was, if you didn't find out back then when you were a teenager that you were from Mexican ethnicity, would that have been a big impact for you at writing Madonna's Michael Park? If that makes any sense.
Help me out a little bit. I'm not sure I'm understanding the question.
If you didn't find out that you were Mexican, if that...
Oh, what if I never found out, would it have been a different book?
Would you have still, made the storyline?
The book would not have existed.
Yeah, because it seems you just made 2 books also talking about your 5 steps.
Yeah, those books would never have existed.
So that kind of blew me away when you said how those characters actually are depicted with characters in real life who were in your family, which blew me away because I was...
Imagine how I felt.
I was just focused on the stereotypical characteristics of each person and how I just got angry within myself, but then I got to find myself within that too. Because I also had a lot of trouble with my ethnic background, being here, being there. I'm like, who am I? And it's so hard.
It is hard, and it's something that I still wrestle with every single day. I still don't really know how to answer that question. I think the idea of identity is something I'm going to continue to write about because I still don't have an answer. But if you don't have an answer, well, thank you. I mean, it's okay. It's okay if you don't have an answer. The fact that you're conscious of the fact that you're looking for one, I think, is enough. No, thank you.
I'm totally looking forward for your next.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Empathy. You mentioned empathy as a key to understanding and bonding with other people, as well as a guide for yourself in life. But there are noticeable clashes sometimes with empathy in the sense that I cannot have the same relationship, for example, with a friend as I do with, say, a professor. I mean, and that's not to be cruel, that is just naturally that because of the societal differences, I cannot have that.
Yeah, sure.
What do you advise when you are brushed up against those limits of empathy? How do you best proceed?
That's a really interesting question. I think I start by reassessing why I've placed limits on sort of my empathy. I think that I have very specific limits because I was raised in an abusive household. And so there are certain triggers that are really sensitive for me. And so it's a constant reassessment process of like trying to figure out like, well, why am I responding in this fashion? Why do I put, why am I sort of keeping myself in this box? And it's a constant thing, man. It's like, that's part of the reason that I write too. Because, we've all had those experiences, for example, when, there's been somebody out in the street that just does something that really frustrates you. I'm from I spent a lot of time in New York, and I just moved to a new city where people walk a lot slower. And let's just say I don't exercise a lot of empathy for slow walkers. And, I'm walking down, the campus at GW, and there's just like a lot of, college kids who, they're not as clued in as you, obviously. They're all like on the phones, and they're like just kind of staggering around. I'm trying to get, just walk in a straight line, And so one of the ways to kind of cook off that sort of energy is to go home and try to write about it and try to figure out like, well, why am I being so impatient with a bunch of college students who are just trying to go off and, have a good day or trying to go off and do their own thing. So, self-analysis really, and that's where the writing comes in for me. Like I like communicating and I love coming out here to do things like this and to do talks like this, but it's also inherently selfish too, because I write to figure out how I look at the world and how I process the world. And I realize that in terms of my own sort of empathetic limitations, the more I write, the more I understand. The more I understand, the more I can broaden that empathy. It needs to be constantly growing and evolving, if that makes any sense. Thank you. Yeah.
I actually really do love the way you use different perspectives throughout each chapter. At first it was really confusing, but you get the hang of it. What's the sole purpose of putting different perspectives in each chapter, and did you mean it to be open-ended? Because I have a lot of questions. If I had gone to sleep earlier, I probably could answer a few more. But I'm really interested in the idea that a single event or a series of events can be observed from different perspectives. And I was always very conscious in the construction of the book that I wanted to hear from different voices, because I only felt by getting those different voices. That's why half of the voices in the book are women, because I wanted to get those specific different perspectives looking at a similar event, because I often felt that one of the challenges in my family was that, we only had one way to look at things, because my family was very close-knit and they didn't really socialize with a lot of people. And my grandmother did, but my mother certainly didn't. And so I wanted to kind of imagine the kind of experience that I wish that my family had had the courage to have in Echo Park. I wish in a way that they were more like the characters in the book. They're not. I know people think when you read a first novel it's autobiographical, but emotionally it is, but like, did the events really happen in this way? It was very different. It was very different. Do you really need to keep it open-ended, or?
Yeah, I feel like it's more interesting when you have to do the work and you have to figure it out, because I feel like life is like that. Much in the same way it's like, you've started here at PCC and it's like, okay, well, what's that going to be like 2 years from now? You know what I mean? Like, you don't know the answer to that. That's how we sort of live life. It's like basically you have to go through every single day. Nobody's going to tell you what your final outcome is going to be. You just have to experience that. And that's the kind of literature I like. I don't like literature that sort of spells out what the end is for you, because if it does, there's no reason for you to read it. You saw all those posters, all those amazing outbursts of creativity there. All of them were different. All of them had their own sort of specific takes. That wouldn't have been possible if I told you what the book was about, or if I told you how each chapter was supposed to end.
Okay, thank you so much.
No, thank you.
Good evening, sir.
Hi.
I have a question about ethnicity. I personally am Peruvian, but over the years, ever since I was younger, people have assumed what I was. Like, they assumed I was Mexican, they've assumed I was Native American, I was Indian. I've even had a person one time guess I was either Egyptian or Persian. But do you think that a person's ethnicity should define who they are?
No. I could elaborate if you want, but no. I mean, that's kind of a yes or no question. I mean, the answer simply is no. It's like you define who you are. You know, I lived in New York for a number of years, and I got mistaken for Sri Lankan. Like, that's pretty specific, you know? So, be who you want to be. If someone doesn't understand, oh well, that's their problem.
Thank you.
No, thank you.
I'm from West China. Okay, so even though you mentioned that your novel is a fiction, but in chapter 2 that you mentioned about Aurora Sarasa, the last woman who got kicked out, Charles Lawin, and my poster is about the story of Charles Lawin. I found out about that Aurora is actually existed.
It's actually what?
Existed. Like that event is actually happened.
Yeah.
Just wondering that you to Aurora name after her, correct?
So are you asking, are there like actual historical events in the novel, or like?
Yeah, it's like so basically some of your novel is based on.
Oh yeah. No, absolutely. Yeah, there are plenty of sort of historical facts in the novel. Like everything about Chavez Ravine, the last woman that was evicted from Echo Park, her first name really is Aurora. I had to change her last name because my publisher thought we might get sued or something. So, but I wanted all the historical facts to be as accurate as possible. But you know, you can do that in a work of fiction. You can take experiences from real life and shape them in whatever way you want to.
That makes the book even more real.
I'm glad you enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Mr. Skyhorse. I hope my question isn't too personal.
Well, I can't acknowledge that until you ask me. So I know what it is, but.
You mentioned earlier how in your family there was violence. Was it hard for you to decide not to go back to your family and stay in college? And was there like a person that made you want to go back?
I didn't have a choice. I basically was either going to live with my mom and my grandmother, or I was, going to be homeless. I didn't have a choice, so I had to go back. And it was really an impossible decision. But, I mentioned I wrote a second book, but, my mother tried to kill me twice. That's not an exaggeration. That actually happened, once when I was 5 and once when I was a sophomore in college. And when you're faced with that kind of prospect, it's not just about sort of whether I stay in school or not. It was literally a life or death situation. But I didn't have a choice. And
If you had a choice, would you not have gone home?
No, of course not. No, if I had the confidence that I have now, I would have said, "See you later, dudes," and then just taken off, and that would have been it. Because why would I have gone back? Why would I have deliberately put myself, in harm's way? I love them, and I know it would have been sort of, very emotionally wrenching experience. But yeah, and when I went to grad school, I went down to Irvine. I started to make that sort of the first breaks away from my mother. We'd get into a fight, and then I wouldn't talk to her for 2 or 3 months. And then she would kind of drop by my house unannounced and leave weird stuff on my car's windshield. That kind of thing. And so, yeah, if my mother hadn't passed away when she did, I don't know what would have happened. I don't know. So.
Thank you.
No, thank you.
Hi, Brando.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. There has been a lot of popular books that gone into filming and been a success. For example, Potter, The Hunger Games. So with that being said, have you ever thought like maybe your new chapter should be like turning your book into a film?
I would love to be in the same category as Hunger Games or Harry Potter, Twilight and such. The book was optioned by HBO, but they ultimately passed. They were going to turn it into, we pitched it as a 5-season miniseries. Like it was going to be 5 seasons, like, like Breaking Bad, like it was going to be a whole thing. And we got this close. But maybe next time. I think it would make a great, series out there for somebody somewhere. I think it would be really cool. Yeah, you'd watch it, right?
I'll watch it.
Yeah, we got 2 with 3 people here, so get with it, HBO.
Thank you.
Thank you, man.
I'm sorry, we're just going to take a couple more questions, and then Mr. Skyhorse has been awake since 2 o'clock in the morning, so we need to make sure he doesn't collapse on stage. But he has agreed to go and sign some books. So for those of you who've been patient and waiting, we have coffee and cookies outside, and he'll answer your questions one-on-one there. Okay, so we'll just take a couple more.
Okay.
Hi, Mr. Skyhorse.
Hi.
I'm thrilled to be able to finally talk to you.
Oh, thank you.
So about your speech tonight, I just want to ask you that your characters Hector, Ephraim, and Aurora have a connection to people that you've known in your life.
Yeah.
But what about the other characters such as Felicia and Angie, Freddie and Manny? Are they actually based on people that you knew in your life, or?
I mean, in a very loose way, like emotionally they are. Like they remind me there's sort of like specific characters that I connect to them, specific people in my life that I connect to them, but are they literally like, this person is connected to that person? No, because then I would have really have not done much fiction writing. I just would have just been taking my real life and changing some names, and I assure you I did more than that. No, it's more about the emotions, and it's more about creating stories inspired by people that I knew and remembered and had very fond memories of.
Thank you.
No, thank you.
Hello, Brando.
Hi.
I'm glad I got to come here and talk. But,
Thank you.
What I wanted to say was that, your speech kind of hit home with me because in high school I was really good at writing too, and I think that was going to be my major for a while. But then when I got here, my first essay was completely trash. And
Join the club.
Yeah. And there's no structure, but and I play music too, and I love music, and so I wanted to be a musician, and that's what I have my major set right now. But I also do want to write books too. So I wanted to say that everything that you said is between going down your own path and everything like that is something that I tell myself every day. But when it gets hard, when life gets tough, it's hard to believe the things that you tell yourself.
Sure.
It's one perspective.
Of course.
So just seeing someone up here with a valid experience of it, just kind of reinforces my creed that I live by.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate you saying that, and if I can give you some parting words that I know really helped me, there's a film director named Jim Jarmusch. It's an independent film maker. You should check out his films, really wonderful stuff. And he said there are 2 traps every artist must avoid: seeking praise and fearing criticism. You do that, you'll be all right.
All right, thanks.
Thanks.
Hi.
Hi.
So we've gone over all the chapters in class, and we were wondering what inspired chapter 2 with Mrs. Calhoun
Oh, yeah.
and her murder. And our professor was wondering why you killed so many people off the book.
That's the second time I've heard that tonight, and that's certainly a valid question. I think the quick answer is that both my mother and grandmother who raised me died suddenly. Well, my mom died suddenly. She was 50. I wasn't expecting it. I'm used to people disappearing from my life. You have a bunch of dads that just happens. They never really stuck around to say, hey, by the way, Brando, it's been fun. I've been your dad for 3 years, but now I got to hit the road because, cops and stuff. So, I'm used to people just suddenly disappearing. So that was my way of dealing with that. The fact that all these people that I had loved and cared about, had invested emotions in, they just left. And I never got any closure with them, because that's, to me, that's how life worked for me for a very long time. And I felt I didn't want to punish my characters, but that's kind of how it works for them too.
And was there like a specific situation or experience that inspired Mrs. Calhoun's murder or death?
Not particularly. I think I had the image of the woman in the swimming pool, like just as an image, just as a picture, and I thought, wow, like that's a really interesting picture. Where is that coming from? And then I just sort of, backtracked from there. But there wasn't, any specific. Like I didn't hate her. Objectively, like I didn't want to kill her off. But I just had this image, and it seemed to make sense within the sort of scope of the story. And what I was saying earlier, like it's really important when you read a novel. Something has to happen all the time. And so like I was constantly coming up with things, well, what's going to happen here? And that was the thing that made the most sense to me.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So thanks again, everybody. Thanks a lot.